Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now. What if I told you there was an MLB team that won the World Series even though they seemingly couldn't score a run to save their lives? A team that ranked in the bottom half of the entire league in runs scored during the regular season entered the playoffs carrying the weakest lineup of any postseason qualifier and was written off by nearly every analyst and pundit before a single October pitch had been thrown. Sounds impossible. Sounds like the kind of fairy tale someone invents to sell movie tickets. But in 2010, the San Francisco Giants did exactly that. And the way they pulled it off still stands as one of the most improbable championship runs in the modern history of Major League Baseball. This is the story of a team built on arms, guts, and just enough clutch hitting to squeak by, and how they turned the most bottom-ranked offense in the postseason field into a World Series trophy. To understand how this championship happened, you first need to understand what the Giants were heading into 2010. The franchise had missed the playoffs for 6 straight years entering that season. 6 years of near misses, disappointing finishes, and an offense that had ranked 26th in runs per game the previous season. That is not a typo. 26th out of 30 teams. While rival organizations were stockpiling bats and building rosters designed to overpower opponents, the Giants were leaning on their pitching staff and hoping the offense would somehow find enough to keep pace. The offseason did not inspire much confidence from the fan base. Instead of going out and adding a genuine run-producing threat, the front office brought in veteran utility pieces in Mark DeRosa and Aubrey Huff. Sensible depth additions. Not exactly the kind of splash that makes you believe a World Series is coming. Giants fans were bracing themselves for Year 7 of the postseason drought. But they had the pitching. Oh, did they have the pitching? At the top of the rotation stood Tim Lincecum, nicknamed the Freak, for his ability to generate elite velocity out of a slight 5'11", 170-pound frame and an unorthodox delivery that looked like it belonged in a physics classroom rather than a major league stadium. He had won back-to-back National League Cy Young Awards in 2008 and 2009, becoming the first pitcher in baseball history to win the award in each of his first 2 full seasons. Behind him was Matt Cain, a quietly elite workhorse who had been one of the most underappreciated starters in the game for years, generating little offensive support and even less public recognition despite routinely pitching at an ace level. Then there was Jonathan Sanchez, a volatile but electric left-hander with the kind of pure stuff that made opposing hitters look foolish. And tucked in at the back of the rotation was a 20-year-old rookie named Madison Bumgarner, who had been recalled in late June and proceeded to pitch like a seasoned veteran from the moment he arrived. The bullpen was anchored by closer Brian Wilson, a flame-throwing right-hander who had one of the most distinctive beards and one of the most dominant ninth-inning arsenals in the game, saving a major league high 48 games during the regular season. The setup course around him was deep and reliable. On paper, this was one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. In practice, they would prove to be even better than that. The offense, however, was a problem from the opening month. The Giants went a respectable 14-9 in April, but they scored just the 20th most runs in baseball during that stretch, and it was immediately clear that the lineup needed to find another gear if this team had any realistic hope of competing in the National League West. Unfortunately, instead of finding another gear in May, the offense fell off a cliff. The Giants went cold, most painfully during a stretch between May 17th and 23rd when they scored 1 run or fewer in 5 of 7 games. Scoring 1 run or fewer in a major league game is not just losing, it is surrender. It is handing the other team a free pass, asking your pitchers to be perfect, and hoping for a miracle. And a large part of the offensive collapse came down to a player who had been expected to carry the lineup. Pablo Sandoval had burst onto the scene when he debuted in 2008, a switch-hitting third baseman with a surprisingly high batting average, sneaky pop, and a natural flair for contact that made him instantly exciting to watch. If the Giants' offense had any hope, Sandoval needed to be the engine. Instead, he hit just .234 in May with a .617 OPS, numbers that suggested a player who had lost his feel at the plate entirely. Without his production, the lineup had no real engine, and games where the pitchers were brilliant became 1-0 grinds that could flip on a single defensive mistake. The spark the offense desperately needed came in the form of Buster Posey. The catcher had been drafted 5th overall in 2008 and had blazed through each level of the minor leagues with almost frightening efficiency, but the Giants had been cautious about when to pull the trigger on his call-up. When he finally made his major league debut on May 29th, the energy shifted immediately. He singled in his first at-bat and drove in a run, and the crowd at AT&T Park responded like they had been waiting for exactly this moment. Posey proceeded to go on a 21-game hitting streak in July that turned him from a promising debut into a bona fide catalyst. He complimented run producers Aubrey Huff, who finished the year hitting .290 with 26 home runs and 86 RBIs, and Juan Uribe, who quietly contributed 24 home runs and 85 RBIs. The lineup was still not going to overpower anyone, but with Posey stabilizing the middle and the veterans contributing timely production, the team started to feel like a genuine contender. As the warm summer air settled over San Francisco, the Giants began firing on all cylinders. The pitching was dominant, the bats were producing just enough, the defense was sharp. They climbed from 5 games back in the division at the start of July to within striking distance of the San Diego Padres by the end of the month, going 28 in July alone, but they could not quite close the gap. Heading into September, they were still 3 games back with not many games remaining and a Padres team that had led the division for months and showed no signs of rolling over. What happened next was the kind of pitching performance that teams talk about for generations. From September 5th through the 24th, the Giants held their opponents to 3 runs or fewer in 18 consecutive games, the first team to accomplish that feat since the 1917 Chicago White Sox. Let that sink in for a moment. The last time anyone had done something like that, Woodrow Wilson was president of the United States. The Giants' pitching staff posted a team ERA of 1.89 during the month of September, the lowest single-month team ERA since the divisional era began in 1969. That is not just historic. That is operating in a completely different dimension from every other pitching staff in the game. Lincecum, who had struggled through a rough August, rebounded to go 5-1 in September with 52 strikeouts and just 6 walks. The entire staff seemed to arrive at the same moment, collectively deciding that the season was not going to end without a division title. They erased San Diego's lead in the final week of the season, clinched the National League West on the last day of the regular season with a 3-1 win over the Padres, and ended a 6-year postseason drought in the process. The city of San Francisco erupted. The Giants were going to the playoffs, and almost nobody outside their clubhouse believed they could go much further. Their first-round matchup was against the Atlanta Braves, and the series opened with one of the most memorable single-game pitching performances in postseason history. Lincecum was on the mound for Game 1, facing veteran right-hander Derek Lowe. Lowe was sharp, keeping Giants hitters off balance inning after inning and taking a no-hitter deep into the game before Cody Ross ended it with a first-pitch home run. But Lincecum was otherworldly. He threw a complete game 2-hit shutout, struck out 14 batters, a franchise postseason record, and the Giants won 1-0. 1 run. 1 single run was all Lincecum needed to dominate that game from start to finish, and he delivered it as cleanly as anyone has ever pitched in October. The only blemish the Braves managed was a 2-hit outing against a pitcher working at what appeared to be the absolute peak of his powers. The Giants dropped Game 2 in gut-wrenching fashion, blowing a 4-run lead and losing 5-4 in 11 innings on a Rick Ankiel home run. Series momentum swung to Atlanta. But Game 3 turned on a sequence of defensive disasters that became one of the more painful afternoons in Braves history. Jonathan Sanchez was brilliant on the mound, striking out 11 and carrying a no-hitter into the 6th inning. The Giants scored without doing much of anything. A ball off the wall that scored a run when the outfielder couldn't quite get to it, and then an infamous dropped pop-up by Braves infielder Brooks Conrad that allowed a run to score on a play that should have been a simple put-out. Conrad would have an extraordinarily difficult series defensively, and his errors repeatedly gave the Giants life when they had no business getting any. Sanchez carried his shutout into the 8th inning before handing the ball to the bullpen, and the Giants took the lead. Then reliever Eric Hinsky delivered a pinch-hit 2-run homer off Sergio Romo to flip the score, and the Giants found themselves down to their final 3 outs. But the Braves were without veteran closer Billy Wagner due to injury, and in his place stood a young right-hander named Craig Kimbrell, who had accumulated just 21 big league appearances at that point in his career. The Giants recognized the moment and manufactured the tying run through a combination of an Aubrey Huff clutch hit to left field and another Brooks Conrad error that let the go-ahead run score in the most unglamorous but effective fashion imaginable. Brian Wilson came on in the 9th with a 1-run lead and shut the door. Giants win 3-2. Game 4 fell to Madison Bumgarner, the 21-year-old rookie, with the Giants 1 win away from advancing. His manager, Bruce Bochy, had said publicly that the organization had all the confidence in the world that Madison would go out there and give them everything he had, and that the kid had no fear. Bumgarner reinforced that by saying he was pretty relaxed about it, that he was just going to keep the same demeanor as always. He backed every word of it with 6 strong innings, allowing just 2 runs, while Derek Lowe matched him nearly pitch for pitch. The game was decided in the 7th when the Giants pushed 2 runs across against a tiring Lowe, taking a 3-2 lead they would not surrender. Brian Wilson recorded the final out, and San Francisco was moving on to the National League Championship Series for the first time since 2002. Waiting for them, there were the Philadelphia Phillies, arguably the best team in baseball. Their lineup was loaded, featuring first baseman Ryan Howard, second baseman Chase Utley, and outfielder Jason Worth, among others. But it was their rotation that genuinely terrified opponents. Roy Halladay had produced one of the finest seasons of his career in his first year after being acquired from Toronto, headlining a group that also included Cole Hamels and Roy Oswalt, who had been acquired at the trade deadline from Houston. Together, they had demolished the Cincinnati Reds in the division series, allowing only 6 runs in 3 games. The Phillies were heavy favorites. The conventional wisdom said the Giants' offense, which had been below league average all season, had no realistic chance against that rotation. Game 1 immediately challenged that assumption. Lincecum and Halladay went toe-to-toe, each dominant through 7 innings, and the Giants won a tight, low-scoring game to steal home field advantage. The offense continued to struggle in waves. Aubrey Huff was hitting just .217 through the opening games. Leadoff man Andres Torres had an OPS that barely registered, and Juan Uribe was doing even less at the plate. But the pitching kept giving the lineup chances. Matt Cain was astonishing in Game 2, throwing 7 scoreless innings and not allowing an earned run through the entire postseason, a statistic that almost defies comprehension when you consider the quality of lineups he was facing. The Giants took a 2-0 series lead with another tight victory. Oswalt answered in Game 3 for Philadelphia, dealing a complete game to get the Phillies on the board. But in Game 4, it was the Giants' pitching that again set the tone. 7 shutout innings from Jonathan Sanchez, and a walk-off moment from Aubrey Huff, who tagged and scored the winning run to give San Francisco a commanding 3-1 series lead. The Phillies were staring elimination in the face. Halladay delivered a masterpiece in Game 5 to keep the season alive, winning 4-2. But Game 6 set up as the Giants' chance to close it out. It did not start smoothly. The Phillies scored twice in the first inning, and the Giants' offense, true to form, was being thoroughly shut down. But the bullpen held the game close, with Jeremy Affeldt and Madison Bumgarner each contributing scoreless innings in relief, keeping the Giants within striking distance until the offense could wake up. They tied the game in the 3rd inning on a Freddie Sanchez error that allowed Aubrey Huff to score. Then, with the series on the line in the 8th inning, Juan Uribe stepped to the plate. Through the first 5 games, he had recorded just 2 hits in 25 at-bats, a disappearing act for a player who had contributed 24 home runs during the regular season. But on a cold October night in Philadelphia, he pulled a pitch into right field and watched it barely clear the wall for a home run that gave San Francisco a 3-2 lead. Brian Wilson came on for a 5-out save, and when he got Ryan Howard looking at a called 3rd strike to end the game, the San Francisco Giants were National League champions. The World Series brought the Texas Rangers, a team that had upset both the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees, to reach baseball's biggest stage, and they came with the most hits in baseball and the 2nd most runs per game in the American League. Everything the Giants were not offensively. Game 1 was supposed to be a classic pitcher's duel, Lincecum against former Cy Young Award winner Cliff Lee. Instead, it became an offensive brawl that the Giants won 11-7, scoring runs in waves against a pitcher who had posted a 1.26 postseason ERA entering that night. Nobody had seen Cliff Lee get hit like that. The Giants hadn't scored more than 4 runs in a game since September 25th, over a month before the World Series began. Nobody expected what came next. Cody Ross later admitted the team genuinely felt they had no chance of scoring many runs off Cliff Lee. The final score made a liar out of every prediction. Freddie Sanchez and Buster Posey sparked a comeback from an early deficit, and the Giants simply did not stop hitting. Juan Uribe hit a 3-run home run off the bench. The crowd at AT&T Park was in disbelief at what they were watching. The Giants won Game 2 behind Matt Cain's typically airtight pitching, Edgar Renteria hitting a go-ahead home run in the 5th, and Brian Wilson closing it out to give San Francisco a 2-0 series lead. The Rangers salvaged Game 3, their only win of the series, with a night where every run was produced by a home run. But nobody in the Giants dugout believed the series was turning. Game 4 brought Bumgarner back to the mound, and the 21-year-old delivered 8 shutout innings while allowing only 3 hits. Aubrey Huff hit a 2-run home run. Buster Posey went deep to center. It was the kind of performance that made people in the stadium forget they were watching a rookie. The Giants won 4-0 and were 1 win away from a championship. Game 5 was the clincher. Lincecum and Lee went toe-to-toe again, this time actually delivering the pitcher's duel both had been expected to produce in Game 1. Both pitched 6 shutout innings before Edgar Renteria, the veteran shortstop who had been one of the Giants' most unheralded contributors all postseason, stepped to the plate in the 7th inning and launched a 3-run home run to left center field that broke the game open. That blast earned Renteria the World Series MVP award. Brian Wilson got the final out in the 9th, and for the first time since the franchise relocated from New York to San Francisco in 1958, the Giants were World Series champions. The numbers told the full story of how they got there. The Giants led all of Major League Baseball with a 3.36 ERA during the regular season. Tim Lincecum and Matt Cain were not just a top rotation duo, they were a generational pairing. Lincecum finished the postseason with 10 strikeouts in 8 innings in the clinching Game 5. Matt Cain did not allow a single earned run across the entire postseason, not one. Bumgarner had gone 8 shutout innings in a World Series game at the age of 21. Brian Wilson had saved 48 games in the regular season and 6 more in the postseason. The 4 starters, Lincecum, Cain, Sanchez, and Bumgarner, became the first homegrown quartet of starting pitchers to reach the postseason together since the 1986 Boston Red Sox. The offense, for its part, had done just enough at precisely the right moments. Cody Ross came out of nowhere, claimed off waivers late in the season, and became the NLCS MVP, hammering home runs off aces that nobody had been able to touch. Edgar Renteria delivered the biggest swing of the World Series at age 35. Aubrey Huff had clutch hits throughout. Juan Uribe saved the pennant with a home run and drove in crucial runs in the World Series. It was not pretty baseball. It was not the baseball of dominant offenses and gaudy run totals. It was grinding, maddening, hold-your-breath baseball where the margin for error was razor-thin every single night and the pitching staff refused to let the game get away from them. Pat Burrell, who had been part of that championship team, captured it as simply and perfectly as anyone could. He said that when you talk about the 2010 team, the opening sentence had to be about the pitching, that it was what ultimately brought them the championship. An improbable feat for a team labeled as one that couldn't score. And he was absolutely right. The 2010 San Francisco Giants proved something that gets overlooked in a sport increasingly obsessed with home run totals and offensive explosions, that a pitching staff capable of keeping a game at 1-0 or 2-1 for 9 innings is worth more than any lineup in the world when October baseball arrives and every game is a coin flip. They took that coin and they flipped it their way all October long. If you made it all the way here, thank you, and you already know what to do. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what your favorite moment of the 2010 Giants run was, and subscribe to Red Dust Report if you haven't already. We are putting out content like this every week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. And if you want to learn about a completely different World Series, one that effectively killed one of the greatest dynasties in baseball history, click the video on your screen right now.